You want to put together a coalition of middle powers. Well, which ones are lining up to back Canada?
Oh boy, we got a lot going on here today. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we have Donald Trump dropping the hammer on Mark Carney, downgrading him from prime minister to governor. That's right, Mark Carney has pissed off Donald Trump. Now threatening tariffs on Canada, massive tariffs. We got a bunch of stuff here. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we got David Coletto, some polling data. We got 43% for the Liberals and 38% for the Conservatives, and the Bloc have gone up to 9, so +2. So not much moving here. We also have Coletto with this percentage of group with positive impressions of Donald Trump. CPC base 22%, 27 for CPC voters. Accessible CPC, this is the swing voters, 18%. Everyone else, liberals, basically 7%, and overall 14%. And Shreyatis is pointing out his numbers are a lot lower than before, and this was what Mark Carney's playing off of. He wants to make Donald Trump even scarier than before, go to an election, get a majority government, because, well, Donald Trump is having his midterms coming up soon, and his polling numbers are not that good. We'll get into that in a minute, but first off, we got Prime Minister Albanese from Australia backing Mark Carney's Davos speech, and with that, Carney's going to be visiting the Australian Parliament in March. I'm not surprised. Instead of getting a deal with America, going over to Australia, we do hardly any trade with them. This is a waste of time for right now. We got Table Salt posting this. Breaking 2026 U.S. National Defense Strategy released late Friday night specifically mentions Canada, and he's wondering here if Carney's going to get the Maduro treatment, defend the U.S. homeland. So going down here, it says, we will engage in good faith with our neighbors from Canada to our partners to Central and South America, but we will ensure that they respect and do their part to defend our shared interest. And when they do not, we will stand ready to take focused, decisive action that concretely advances U.S. interest. This is the Trump, Colliery, and Monroe Doctrine, and America's military stands ready to enforce it with speed, power, and precision, as the world saw in Operation Absolute Resolve. Now, is this a threat? I don't know. I don't think America is going to be rolling in the tanks, but as I mentioned before, there seems to be something funny going on. I think Mark Carney and Donald Trump know each other from before Trump getting reelected and Mark Carney becoming prime minister. Are they working together to make Canada the 51st state, intentionally tanking our country so then America and Trump can take us over? I don't know. We're going to see what happens here as we've got Donald Trump coming out with this. If Governor Carney thinks he's going to make Canada a drop-off port for China, send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and the general way of life. If Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. Thank you for attention on this matter. So Donald Trump clapping back against Mark Carney. You're seeing multiple people coming to the same conclusion that I brought up a while ago, that it's possible that Trump and Carney are working together to tank Canada. It's good for America. It's awful for Canada, but Mark Carney's the guy to do it. He's 91% invested in America. He's not patriotic about our country. As Reclamaire saying here, the last 20 months continue to push me towards the conclusion that this entire USA versus Canadian process is scripted. Carney's knowledge and experience clearly sees a brick wall ahead for Canada, and yet every chance he hits the gas pedal. He's not trying to get a deal here, and as he says, there's only one result from this 51st state. With that, Dominic LeBlanc has come out and said that, as the Prime Minister has stated this week, Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership. He just says go on to benefit both sides, and he says there is no pursuit of a free trade deal in China. What was achieved was a resolution of several important tariff issues. Canada's new government is building a stronger economy, yada, yada, yada. So he's basically saying this isn't a trade deal, even though Mark Carney's bragging about a trade deal. We've got Brian Lilly coming to the same conclusion. Another day, another threat, more chaos. Are Trump and Carney working together to ensure a liberal majority if we have a spring election? Seems pretty funny. Now, looking at Donald Trump's polling data here, we can see this is an aggregate like 388 in Canada, and this is what he started at here, 50.5% on the far left. And as we move down, he announced 51st state, Greenland, Panama, all that, and he immediately dropped down. And by the time April hit here and Mark Carney wins the election here, he's at 45% approval and 51% disapproval. And as that's gone on here, you can see this is widened now to the point where today it's 54% disapproval, 42% approval. So these numbers are not good for Trump. We've also got one more graph here on New York Times. Same thing, started at 52%, and today this one shows 41% approval, 55% disapproval. So Donald Trump is in a bit of hot water here for his midterms. When the midterms come, and if he loses a bunch of power, a bunch of seats, then he has less has power to push back against Mark Carney. So that tells us that Mark Carney is going to go to an election before then. And the midterms, as we see here, are November 3rd, 2026. So Mark Carney has like 10 months before this happens. So he has to have an election before then. So with everything that's going on with Donald Trump and Mark Carney, and you just keep seeing these clapbacks, putting tariffs on, scaring Canadians, and now you see all these responses on X. I'm not going to go through them, but there's so many business leaders and politicians and all sorts of people saying, we have to fight the Americans, we have to do this and that. Like, it's rallying this kind of fighting spirit. And these guys know what they're doing. They're engineering this. It seems like it. At least Mark Carney's definitely engineering this to get a majority. Is he suckering Trump into this? I don't think so. Trump wasn't born under a bus. He knows what's going on here. So is he working with Carney is the question. Well, we don't know, but I mean, we do know that Jared Kushner definitely knows Mark Carney, these guys together at this event. And if you're new around here, this is attached to this deal here, Brookfield plus the Qatari Investment Authority, QIA, for 666 Fifth Avenue, bailing out the Kushner family property. This was Qatari money that went to Brookfield that bailed out Jared Kushner's family business, their real estate business, just like Donald Trump. And Jared Kushner is married to Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump's daughter. There's already this major connection here. We have all this other Qatari Brookfield money in here. Donald Trump just did a huge deal with Brookfield, United States government. Brookfield and Cameco announced transformational partnership, yada, yada. This is for $80 billion for nuclear energy. There's a lot of ties here. If we look a little bit deeper into the past of Jared Kushner, we get this. He served as a senior advisor to Donald Trump in the first administration from 2017 to 2021. Before that, he took over the Kushner properties from his dad, Charles Kushner, who was convicted of 18 criminal charges, including illegal campaign contributions, tax evasion, witness tampering in 2005, although Charles was pardoned by Donald Trump in 2020 because, well, he's the father-in-law to Ivanka Trump. Now, the situation gets a little extra messy because Donald Trump goes and captures Maduro, and what do they do with all that money that they are getting from Venezuela? They've stuck it in an American bank account, right? No. Hundreds of millions of dollars that the United States is raising from the sale of Venezuelan oil is being sequestered in Qatar. It's an indirect path that could speed the flow of much-needed money to Venezuela, but also raises questions about the transparency surrounding the funds. It goes on to say the funds were sent to Qatar rather than being held in U.S. bank accounts. Something stinks about this because, well, we already know from Trump's first administration that Jared Kushner was the guy to deal with the Middle East, to deal with Qatar and Saudi Arabia. It says here, Kushner was the primary Trump administration participant for the Middle East peace process, authoring the Trump peace plan and facilitating the talks that led to the signing of the Abraham Accords and the normalization agreements between Israel and various Arab states in 2020. He is the point guy for that. As soon as Donald Trump got into power for the second time, immediately his sons went over to the Middle East and started inking all of these deals. Samassia Resort, $5.5 billion, led by the Qatari Dyer. It's designed as a 7-kilometer long mega entertainment resort district. We also have them inking this deal, a $2 billion investment by Abu Dhabi-based MGX into Binance, a crypto deal. We've also got Trump Dubai Hotel, $1 billion deal here. We have Qatar giving Donald Trump this airplane, this big jumbo jet. Remember all that? So there's a lot of ties here. It's just all very suspicious. Mark Carney goes over to Qatar. Donald Trump and his family wrapped up in Qatar. They're putting this Venezuelan oil money over in Qatar. Jared Kushner here being a part of Donald Trump's Board of Peace, which is targeting that whole region as well. Now we have Donald Trump clapping back against Carney, saying he's all mad, 100% tariffs, rallying up Canadians, and then Carney's going to get a majority government from this. You can just see how this is playing out. This is basically scripted, as a reclamaire said. This looks very scripted. These were Carney's words just 10 months ago.
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
Now, we know from Mark Carney's body language now, whenever he gets these little cheeky smiles, especially this one right here, you see that little smile? Just before he said take on the Americans, he's not taking on the Americans. This guy's practically an American. He's 91.62% invested in America. Is he really taking on the Americans? I call bull crap. He wants to enrich his stocks here. Canadians are getting ripped off here. They have no idea what's going on. They're being manipulated, and Carney's going to get rich off this. Now, the question is Donald Trump in on this? Because if Donald Trump's not in on this, then he's getting played by Carney. And this is an interesting take here by Ryan Garrettson. He said his plan to tank Canada and U.S. relationship goes back to his election campaign. And when the USMCA deal, which he is purposely ruining, doesn't get renewed, he will use emergency powers to do whatever he likes. Is that what's going to happen here? Is he going to say, well, you know what? The agreement's gone. We got to use the emergency powers. I'll just decide everything that's going on. No point using Parliament anymore. You got to wonder who's on Canada's side. It's not this guy. And obviously Donald Trump is America first. Now, we do have business leaders calling this stuff out as it is. It's Norman Spector saying, boom, Carney was effectively wagging his finger at the United States in the highest or lowest tradition of its so-called allies, who graciously sheltered under the protective wing of the American military power while attempting to collegialize all alliance decisions on the basis that the United States was a great mastiff which would do the work and take the risk while the European and Canadian allies held the leash and gave the instructions. So he's basically calling out Carney here, saying, you know what, America's been carrying the weight, and whether we like it or not, they have all the power because the liberals have destroyed our country and made us weak over the past 10 years. We have to work with them however possible to get through the next few years while we open up some of our market, our oil and our gas, to other countries. But right now, we don't have the power to be wagging the finger at Donald Trump. Now, the question is, are these guys working together? Well, who knows? I still put it out there. This is very possible. And if you've been watching for a while, I've said this months ago because it's on my chart. There's a lot of things that line up, especially in Qatar. Meanwhile, we're sending billions of dollars over to Ukraine. I thought this was interesting. Kirk pointing out, can someone explain this to me? Canada has $0 in gold reserves and sent over $20 billion in support to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's gold reserves, they have a ton of them. Why aren't they selling their gold to pay for everything? Why are they taking our money? It's a fair question to ask. So with all this, we've got Mark Carney's team releasing this video.
With our economy under threat from abroad, Canadians have made a choice to focus on what we can control. You are choosing to put your hard-earned dollars behind Canadian businesses and Canadian workers.
He's painting this narrative that Canada can survive on its own. We don't need the Americans, those bad Americans, that crazy Donald Trump. He's taking everything away and we can give ourselves more than anyone can take away, which is a load of garbage. That's not possible. If that's our real plan going forward, we're going to have some serious poverty in this country.
Canada's new government is doing the same with our new Buy Canadian policy. We're on a mission to build big, from millions of homes that will improve affordability, to major projects that will transform our economy, to the new military hardware that will protect Canadians and our sovereignty. We will build big with Canadian materials, Canadian steel, aluminum, and lumber, with Canadian technology and with Canadian workers. We can't control what other nations do. We can be our own best customer.
No, we can control getting a deal with the Americans and not trying to poke Donald Trump in the eye every 10 minutes. That's not what Carney wants, though. He wants a majority government, and he doesn't care how many Canadian jobs are lost until he gets it.
We'll buy Canadian, we'll build Canadian. And together, we will build Canada strong.
Melissa posting a collage here from so many publications. What a very, very, very unlikely U.S. invasion of Canada might look like. From brutal blitz to guerrilla warfare, imagining what a U.S. invasion of Canada might look like. It's just one after the other here. These are scare tactics, scaring Canadians that the Americans are going to invade us. They're not going to invade us. Is Donald Trump trying to pull Canada into America and Mark Carney's helping him do it? It looks possible at this point that Carney is doing everything possible to try to make Canada the 51st state. And once again, I remind everyone, 77% of our trade is with America. It doesn't matter if we trade more with China or the UK or Japan or any other of these countries. We have to get a deal with America.
Trump said there on Truth Social, threatening that 100% tariff on all goods coming into the USA from Canada. He also said that China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and general way of life. Reading the post from Truth Social this morning, what is your take on what he said? Is this a realistic threat?
Well, I don't know if the 100% tariffs are a realistic threat. I mean, that's sort of what Trump does. He makes something extreme, but he can come back from it. What I think is a more realistic threat or landing point for him is that in the CUSMA or the USMCA, there's an Article 3210, which basically says that if any country, in this case Canada, were to negotiate a free trade agreement with a non-market economy, that means China, that they have to give 3 months notice in advance to the United States, or in this case, or any other trading partner. And then if the other trading partner doesn't like the outcome, they could cancel the CUSMA with 6 months notice. And I think that's kind of Trump teeing up that, okay, Canada. Now, the term free trade agreement isn't defined in the USMCA, so I'm not sure that this would really qualify, but obviously it's kind of self-judging. But I think it's an indication that if Trump wants to play hard with Canada, he can, which is what makes a lot of what the Prime Minister did in Davos inexplicable to me. I mean, I've always said on these panels that I think there's a disconnect between the political market, which rewards a Canadian Prime Minister for saying things like this, and the economic market and the negotiating market, which I think actually doesn't. And that's the disconnect. So I don't know where it goes. And the other thing is, you want to put together a coalition of middle powers. Well, which ones are lining up to back Canada?
Great question. Which ones are lining up? I don't see the line out the door. There's not even a line inside the building. Where are they?
Oh, well and good for people in the back of a salon in Davos to applaud, give you standing ovations. Where are the countries say, yep, we're going over the cliff with you, Mr. Carney? I haven't heard it.
This guy is so on point here, and Mark Wagner, very rare win to see on CBC. The sad thing is you look across X here, and there's so many Canadians and Liberals taking the bait. They're just being manipulated so badly. You have a couple good comments here. No other country is that stupid to gang up with Carney. The problem for us is that Carney will benefit electorally while the country burns. Yep, that's what he's doing. We got Nick Nanos here saying he thinks an election is coming. I already said it. Because of the midterms, Carney's got to do it before November.
I think there's probably a good chance that the Liberals might want an election this year. You know, the thing is that the trade talks are not going very well. And when we do have a trade agreement, whenever that might be, it's probably not going to be as good as our current arrangement. And defending a trade agreement that's not as good would be difficult for any government. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Liberals want to get ahead of that and also get ahead of the midterm elections in the United States in order to try to build a stronger mandate in the House of Commons.
Okay, Nick, thank you so much for your insights as always, and stay.
I trust this will be true. This coming from an Order of Canada recipient who got one from Mark Carney. If he's saying that election's coming this year, then I think we can assume that's probably the case. Jumping over to CTV, we have another interview here with some common sense.
Let's now bring in Brian Lee Crowley, Managing Director at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Brian, good evening and thanks for your time.
Good evening. It's great to be with you.
So not too long ago, we recall, Brian, that the U.S. itself negotiated a deal with China to de-escalate their trade war. Canada did the same thing. What do you make of these latest threats by Donald Trump?
Well, I think this is entirely in keeping with Donald Trump's general approach to any kind of negotiation. I'm frankly surprised that people are still surprised by it. The very first thing that he does is he has this unerring sense for weakness and fear. And what he does is he immediately trots out what he thinks the opposing party most fears. I mean, let's face it, we export 50% of everything that's made in the private sector in Canada, and 2/3 of that goes to the United States. You know, there is no other economic relationship that is anywhere near as important to us as the relationship with the United States. And Donald Trump is one of his big priorities, and this is a cross-party priority in Washington, is to tamp down China's growing power and try and rally the Western powers against deeper reliance on China. So he sees Canada. You know, it's not a question of free trade with China. What he sees is the Prime Minister of Canada announcing a trade deal with China, and he says, "Look, if you may have to make a choice, Canada, between China and the United States, and if you choose China, there will be consequences." I think that's the fundamental message that Trump is trying to communicate.
And you know what surprises me, Brian?
Yeah, that is the message, and he's spot on there. Trump seeks out weakness. He's really good at sniffing that out and squeezing people in those sorts of negotiations. Now, the question here is Mark Carney in on it? Are they working on this together to tank Canada to become the 51st state? Wouldn't that be something? We become the 51st state, and it's all the Liberals' fault for doing it.
And in all this is the fact that the president is not seeing that he is actually forcing his allies, especially Canada, to make that choice. The way, the manner in which he's been behaving with Canada and all that he has been proposing he wants to do, from making it the 51st state to calling the Prime Minister as governor, he is forcing that choice upon us to expand and diversify our trade is concerned. Speaking of which, how do you think all of this is going to impact the discussions when it comes to CUSMA?
Yes, look, there is no doubt that Donald Trump, the way that he behaves is terribly insulting and is designed to evoke emotions in the people on the other side of the table from him. And he is a master at that. What we need to do as Canadians, people who are very deeply invested in a close relationship with the United States, we need not to rise to his bait. When we do, we play his game. What we need to do is every time he says these outrageous things, he calls the prime minister, governor, and he talks about the 51st state, and he talks about 100% tariffs on trade with China. The most positive thing that we can do is to say, oh, thank you very much for your comments, Mr. President. Can we get back to the matter at hand now? Don't let him set the agenda by appealing directly to our emotions to make us a weak negotiating partner. That's exactly what he's doing. And we keep falling into the trap.
Do we?
This is so well said. This guy's on point. And just think, if Mark Carney said, thank you, President Trump, for your comments. Let's get back to the table and negotiate CUSMA. Let's get a new trade agreement. Let's build the Golden Dome. Let's build our security. Let's make our country stronger. If he just came back with those messages and wasn't insulting him, poking him in the eye, all this kind of stuff, then that makes Donald Trump look bad to his own people if he doesn't take him up on that offer. But that's not what's happening. Carney's not offering that up. Trump would almost be obligated to do that. Otherwise, he would get slammed in the polls if Carney just keeps being polite and Trump just keeps slamming him. But that's not what's happening. Mark Carney just keeps poking Trump in the eye, and then Trump is just poking him back in the eye. And we know this to be true from the polling data, where Donald Trump was saying 51st state, all this kind of stuff, and Donald Trump's numbers started going down. You see the disapproval. Mark Carney wins the election right here. You can see right at the peak of this. And then what happens afterwards? Mark Carney starts calling him transformational president, all these nice flowery words. And what happens? Look at this. The numbers come together. Donald Trump goes from 52.4 all the way down to 49.1% disapproval, or his approval goes from 45 up to 47, almost 48% here. And this is the American people. They like to see Donald Trump working with Mark Carney in Canada and us getting a deal. And the more that Donald Trump goes away from that and is not getting a deal, then you see the numbers start to diverge again. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on in America to affect all of this, but we can see this exact section here is the Canadian election, the interactions with Mark Carney and Donald Trump together. So all they have to do is engineer this again. Mark Carney calls an election, and then Mark Carney can try to get the majority the second time around. This seems scripted. It's engineered. Now, I think Trump is hoping that things turn around after getting Greenland or getting parts of Greenland, wherever the deal ends up being there, as well as Venezuelan oil and all these kind of things. But I don't know if he's going to recover from the stuff he's doing. He's just coming out too wild with it. The polling doesn't lie. A lot of Americans not happy with what he's doing. Either way, we have to get a deal with America, and it's clear Carney doesn't want to get one. If we go back to where they're showing these images here, just notice here, Mark Carney, Order of Canada, Donald Trump wearing an American flag pin. Same thing here, American flag, Order of Canada. And you notice this one, it's a red tie. This is a different day. Donald Trump's got an American flag here, pin, Mark Carney, Order of Canada. This guy's not a patriotic Canadian. If I was the Prime Minister of Canada, I wouldn't be wearing this pin, or at the very least, you would have a Canadian pin as well as this one. This guy's not a patriotic Canadian. He's pretending to be. He was in America. He's in the UK. He can say what he likes. This guy's not a real Canadian.
And we keep falling into the trap.
Do we, though? Because I ask you that because the Prime Minister, as we know, when he was at Davos, he gave a speech not mentioning Trump, not mentioning, of course, the United States, but he got applause for it. And a lot of leaders came out and said, well said, Mark Carney. And then, of course, he had to hit back the way he did about what the president said about how Canada lives because of the U.S. Coming to the point, we know that this is the most important partner we have to deal with, Brian. But moving forward, how do you see then Canada deal with them when this president is so erratic and every now and then has a flip-flop on his own decision?
Well, I look back to the first Trump presidency when our NAFTA agreement came up for renegotiation. And you may recall that Donald Trump said, oh, NAFTA, worst trade agreement in the history of the world. We're going to get rid of it. I'm going to rip it up. And, he got everybody quite upset and frightened. But when you actually sat down and negotiated with him, he agreed to a trade agreement which in its details was not actually significantly that different from NAFTA. So you have to separate out the negotiating tactics that he uses. He's constantly trying to stick his finger in everybody's eye, trying to frighten us, trying to upset us, trying to make us angry because he thinks that makes us weak negotiating partners. Now, so we need to keep our eye on the ball in terms of our relationship with the United States. But to your point, of course, we need to diversify our trade relationships as much as we possibly can. That's always an imperative. Why would we not want to sell to as many people as we possibly can? Yeah. That's great. Yeah. But we have to bear in mind that our relationship with the United States is the one indispensable part of the prosperity of Canada from an international point of view.
You bet.
So this guy's 100% spot on here. The numbers don't lie. We have to get a deal with America. This is the only deal Carney needs to sign. If he wanted to be successful, all he has to do is do a new deal here, sectoral tariffs, CUSMA agreement. That's it. And instead, he's doing everything else, going to Australia, going to China, Qatar, not to mention all the other places he's gone, Germany, Palestine. And what has he offered our country? Virtually nothing.